When discussing abortion or euthanasia or really any other ethical issue at all, the issue of personhood, who we are as a person, really is at one of the foundational issues. In other words, it's a value statement on how you value people and how you describe a person that really affects how we discuss abortion and those areas. So last week we discussed the issue of personhood or anthropology, which is also called the mind-body problem. In other words, we have a mind and we have a body. The question is how they interact. How do you explain their interaction? In other words, you've got immaterial and material, and the question comes up then, how does the material and the immaterial relate to each other mechanically? In other words, how does that all work together? You've got a brain, you've got a soul, you've got an intellect, you've got a mind, but how does that fit together with your body? Now, we seem to know it does, but medical science today, or science at all, or physics, can't explain that link. We're still at a quandary, even though we've studied for thousands and thousands of years this very issue. Last week we talked about one approach to monism. That approach is, one approach to personhood, and that approach is called monism. There were three approaches that we talked about last week. Materialism says that the only thing that exists is material, and therefore your body's all there is, and your body and your chemicals in your body just produce your thoughts and your mind. Therefore, your thoughts and mind are really an illusion, and when you die, there's no soul, there's no mind. It was just something your body was producing, and therefore your ego was a lie. It really made you think that you had a physical existence, an individual existence of your own, but in reality, according to materialists, your individual existence is just something that's created in your mind, and your mind's created by your body, and when your body dies, there's no mind. Now, you can see how that would relate to euthanasia and how it would value a person, or abortion, or even sexual ethics, or any other kind of ethics. In other words, these mental things are illusions, so they're really not important or real, so really any kind of value on those are really useless. And we talked last week about the materialistic approach, the identity theory, where the mind and the body are just two terms for the same idea. And we talked about idealism, where idealism says that there is no body, there's only mind. And that the body is a figment of your mind. Your matter is produced by your mind, and your individuality is produced by your mind. And so your mind is over those things. And of course, again, you can see how that would relate to the physical world, and really viewing the physical world as an illusion or useless or nothingness, and how that would relate to abortion and sexual ethics and euthanasia. So we had that discussion last week, but this week we're discussing another approach to the issue of personhood, and that approach is called dualism. Dualism affirms that there are two substances, a mind and a body. But the question still arises, how do those two substances interact? As you'll see on the PowerPoint screen there are three approaches in the way they interact. In other words, one's called interactionism. Interactionism says there are two substances, mental and physical, and mental events can sometimes cause physical events, and vice versa. In other words, interactionism says there are two substances, soul and body, mind and body, and those substances interact in some kind of way. Now, interactionism doesn't suggest to say how those substances interact, but they do believe they interact. Now, there are people out there who are atheists or who are non-Christians who would hold a dualism and an interactionism, and they would just suggest that we still don't know how they interact. As a Christian, most Christians would hold to some form of an interactionism and a dualism, which will believe there is a body, a soul, and a soul, and that those two, body and soul, are interacting. Now, a Christian would say that, again, we can't scientifically explain how they interact, but we believe that there's a holy God of the Bible who made us in his image, and therefore He has created our body and our mind to be holistic, to interact together, and we still believe that's a mystery. We don't know scientifically how to explain that, but we do hold to some kind of interactionism as Christians. And we believe that we've been made in the image of God, and we have been created like Him, and our body is good, and our mind and soul is created to think and to have dominion like God does. Now, of course, obviously in theology we discuss how the fall has affected that, but we do believe that God has created us that way. Others, on the other hand, would be occasionalism, would hold to the idea of dualism, and they would say, would answer on how to interact. The philosophy would be called occasionalism. Occasionalism says there's no causal relationship between physical and mental. God is the intermediary link between physical and mental, and when you will to move your arm, God moves it. So really, your mind's not moving your arm, and there's no interaction there. God times it just right to where when your mind wants something to move, God moves it for your body. And that's called occasionalism. Another approach is called parallelism. The parallelism would say mental and physical events are correlated in a regular way without any causal effects. Two clocks set in a pre-established harmony. Parallelism would say that they're timed just right, just like occasionalism, but God's not moving your arm. It's just timed somehow in eternity, and they're timed correctly. And when your mind says for your arm to move, your arm moves, but there's no interaction between mind and body. Now, those two approaches are philosophical approaches, occasionalism and parallelism, that we as Christians would not hold. We would hold that they are interacting together, and God's created them to interact together. Again, you would see how these would affect our idea of the person also, and how this would affect abortion and euthanasia. In other words, the only way you can truly value a person is to believe that we've been fearfully and wonderfully made by a personal God, and therefore our personhood is in the image of God's personhood. And therefore our body's not evil. We are in sin, and we are sinful, and we are born in sin, and have to be saved from that condition. But we believe God has created our body and our mind to interact together, and therefore persons are valued on the level of God's creation and who He created us to be.